So LaWanda, I'm curious, when Spike Lee first came to you and said, "I'm doing this movie called BlacKkKlansman," and he explained to you the plot of it, what kind of hair and makeup job were you anticipating for Ron Stallworth?
Well, what's funny is that Spike is very secretive sometimes when it comes to projects. So he actually called me a couple of weeks before I even knew what the project was about and asked me if I could do, an afro wig for a male lead. And when I asked him, well, what is this for? He laughs and just hangs up. Kind of, he's kind of funny like that. And then when he called again a few weeks later, I said, I really need to know what this is for, Spike. I can't just, I can do it, but I need to know who this is for. So he set up a meeting with John David. And it wasn't until I got a call from the producer, actually, Marcy Brown, who really explained what the project was about. But I've worked with Spike in the past, and he really likes my work, and I love working with him. And so when he calls, I pretty much kind of do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this one, so it's a period film. It's set in the 1970s, and there is an afro in it.
Yeah.
There's a couple of different hairstyles. So I
There's
wonder.
lots of different things going on, yeah.
Exactly. So tell us about some research just to start off with.
Well, once I figured out what the storyline was about and that it was a true story, I was like blown away. And I really wanted to get everything right, so especially with a period piece. So I did my research as far as I looked up images of police officers in Colorado Springs in the 70s. I looked up Klansmen members. Of course, I had to look at some footage of David Duke. I also looked at some old Soul Train episodes and some old Jet magazines. And I talked to my mom, who was around in the 70s, pretty much anything that could give me an idea of authenticity to add to the film.
Mm-hmm. It's such a, I mean, your work in this movie feels particularly crucial to the identity of these characters, given the subject matter, given the period. Can you talk just a bit about how your work helps influence these characters?
Well, some of these characters are real people. Most of them are real people. So we didn't want them to look like 1970s Halloween costumes. We didn't want them to look like they were, you know, characters so much. We wanted them to look like real people, and so that was very important as far as the research went to, find real footage and real images of people and emulate that look. As far as John David goes, it was a conscious decision to make his afro perfect. Everyone always says, "Oh, his afro was so perfect in the film." That was a conscious decision, just to go along with his personality and kind of where he was in between two worlds, being a police officer and also trying to be aware of this new movement, and coming into awareness himself of the Black, revolutionary movement. Laura's character, she played Patrice. Her afro was a little more unruly. It kind of represents, she kind of represented more of an Angela Davis type of persona, and so everything was very specific and thought out as far as the hairstyles went.
You mentioned that perfect afro. I think about the first shot of him in the movie where he's walking into the to the police department for the first time, and he fixes his hair. I mean, it tells you something about the character from the first go.
Yeah, and it's also like a pride thing at a time where people, African Americans, were very proud to wear their hair like that, and just coming into consciousness at that point.
Well, there's several scenes in the movie that deal with Black identity and about, Black is beautiful and things like that. I mean, I think about that scene with Kwame Ture, and there's all these extras in there, and there's all these very specific shots of audience members, all these really tight close-ups. Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, that's one of my favorite parts of the film. Mainly because it showcases, a lot of the hair and makeup, the work, that we put in, and following the speech and what he's saying in the speech, it just shows kind of like these beautiful portraits almost in the middle of the film of these beautiful Black images and these students, these young students who are just proud of themselves and should be proud of themselves. And so it was a beautiful moment in the film for me.
Yeah, very striking and powerful moment. You mentioned the Klan members. I wonder if you could talk a bit about some of the what did you find as you were doing this research? I mean, what kind of hairstyles did you want to try to give to them?
Well, you know, to be honest with the Klansmen, I wanted them to look like a different. I wanted them to look different across the board because these are people who pretty much were living secret identities. I mean, amongst themselves, of course, they knew who each other were, but, you know, I wanted them to look like regular, everyday, you know, nice American citizens. So a lot of them had regular haircuts and, you know, just like kind of, you know, the 1970s flips, and some of them had long hair, just kind of like typical 70s hair. Nothing too specific or too crazy. Yeah, I wanted them to look like regular, nice people. Some of them looked like gritty and, you know, like they, you know, backwoods type guys. And some of them looked very clean cut, even down to the character Walter, who was a former military. He was played by Ryan Eggold, a former military vet, and he just had a military haircut. So we wanted them to be very regular, you know, so there would be no assumptions of who, you know, who they are.
Yeah, it feels very nondescript. I mean,
Yeah.
it's sort of, you know, I mean, you are taking place in the period where, you know, hippies and radicals would wear their hair long, but obviously
Right.
these are not those kinds of people.
Right. There was a few in there that looked a little, you know, but, you know, we didn't want it to look uh, too stylized, if that
Right.
makes any sense.
Right. In terms of Adam Driver's character, can you talk a bit about what some of your ideas were for him?
You know, I'm going to be honest. I looked at a lot of pictures of John Travolta.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my inspiration for his look. He kind of had like a almost like a shaggy type look anyway. So I wanted to kind of play on that and keep that going. I think it fit him very well.
Yeah. You mentioned David Duke, and I mean, obviously, this is somebody who, unfortunately, is a public figure. What did you find in your research about him and how you know, portrayed him as a young man?
You know what? He was very soft spoken. I did notice that. I've had heard of David Duke. Um, and I knew what he had represented back then, and you know later on, but I hadn't really watched footage. I guess I wouldn't
Mhm.
watch much footage of him. So I was very surprised to see to hear how soft spoken he was and intelligent he came across. Um, and I could see how people would. He seemed very influential to the right type of mind. So that was surprising. But as far as his hair goes, we had to we had to get a wig made for him because he was so adamant about looking exactly like uh, David Duke. So we were on board and we had that made, and he really transformed with the hair and the facial hair. He really transformed into him.
Yeah, it's kind of striking because I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
there's footage of him later on at the end of the movie, the way he is now, and you know how similar you made Topher Grace look to him.
Yeah.
So, working with Spike, you've worked with him on a couple of projects,
Mhm.
like the TV version of "She's Gotta Have It,"
That's
and
right. And
"Sleep."
we've also yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, go. I was just
Oh
say
yeah,
"Sleepwalk Jesus,"
Sleep
and
Love Jesus
yeah.
and Red Hook Summer was the first project I worked on with him.
What is it like working with Spike Lee?
You know what? He is very passionate. Um, he's a really nice person. I don't know if people know that about him, but he really is. But he's also very passionate about work. And he challenges you. If there's something that he needs, or if there's a change, he likes to switch things up a lot. If there's a change that needs to be that needs to happen. You know, you need to be on your toes and make sure you can adjust to the change. And he works very quickly, which I can appreciate because I have a family. I love going home and getting home for dinner. Um, but I love working with him. He's very passionate. His work is amazing. I'm just honored to work with him.
Does it get easier over time? I mean, learning his rhythm
Um,
from
I
the
think
last to the
so.
first
I think
time?
so. I think once you learn how he works and what to expect and what is expected of you, I think that it gets easier.
Well, he does, I mean, employ a lot of the same people over and over again.
Yeah.
You know, from since like she's got to have it or do the right thing as far back
Yeah.
as that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, talk a bit about the environment on the set and what that's like.
Well, the environment on set, because of that, because he hires a lot of the same people, it's really like family.
Mhm.
You know, you go on the set and people know you by name and they know how many kids you have and they ask you about Thanksgiving dinner. And there's like, definitely a family vibe on the set of a Spike Lee on a film or television show. And I appreciate that. I love it. I think it's amazing. It really makes going to work, feel like, it makes 12-hour day feel like a breeze,
Yeah.
because you got to spend time with people that you enjoy. Of course, you're not going to enjoy people all the time, but it
Yeah.
helps. It helps a lot.
You know, this film feels like it came at the right time. I mean, unfortunately, there seems like there's always a right time for a movie like this, but especially now in what we're seeing in recent history. Uh, why do you think this film has had such an impact on people that have seen it?
Well, I just feel like it just shows that, although things have changed, not that much. Things haven't changed that much. Just with the ending, that was a lot of some people were upset about the ending. Some of them felt like it wasn't necessary, but I feel like it was completely necessary to kind of bring everything back to the point that this is still happening, and there's still people out there who have racist beliefs and things like that. So I feel like it was necessary. I feel like that's why it's so relevant now, is that a lot hasn't changed. So I mean, it's been 40 years. you
Yeah,
know
and I mean, I think that oftentimes with movies like this, it's easy to say, "Well, isn't it crazy how things were back then?" But you know, the ending of the movie really makes you think of it. It contemporizes it, and it makes you
yeah,
think about how much more work we have to do.
yeah. And how much we need to vote.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a really powerful and important movie, and it's got some great hair too. So
Oh, thank you so
you're
much.
welcome. LaWanda, thank you for your time. Congratulations.
Zach, thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye.